the intensity of make-believe, a very ancient aspect of the human psyche, of creating a little enclosed world within which there is one reality as distinct and separate from the other reality that's outside it. It's, if you like, it's the two elements of drama are the mask, which covers the face, and you hide behind it, and you're one person behind it, or the arena, the circular performing area in which there is a magic that doesn't exist within it, but it senses other people outside looking in on the magic circle. These two things that are at the very beginning of myth and where imagination belongs. These instincts, I think, are preserved by young children in the very, I don't know what Mr. Piaget would say, but I would think it was between 6, 7, and 12, that game playing of intense make-believe, which is why, incidentally, children, when they are in the grip of that imaginating, are such superb film actors. When you photograph a child gripped in a moment of make-believe, the image has an extraordinary sort of cinematic power. Well, that capacity, to preserve that capacity, is what great actors do, and what I think great writers and directors do. They preserve the capacity to concentrate their lives in a little make-believe. And as you grow up, you're often trained out of that ability.
More often than not, when I get out of my car and walk onto the set of the movie, what faces me is not a problem solved with a lens or a filter or a light. I have the best people around me. If I can articulate what I see in any way, they will probably be able to realize it. But that incredible dance of making a moment of story and performance, truth, reality, charm, something that is both interesting and real, which are not always congruous, all the dance of having to coax that out with blocking, with notes, with actors, with feeling out of a text, is what he was always focused on reminding us would be the fearsome and frightening, naked job with that no light meter or director's finder could in a way shield us from just that moment of exposure where the scene isn't working. How do I make it? How do I make it work?
The mechanics of directing, the uses of screen size and eye lines and so on here, it is, in my opinion, the least important aspect of directing. You can pick that stuff up in 2 weeks. The other stuff, of what goes on between people and how they feel, takes half a lifetime.
I was absolutely flabbergasted when we had for a fortnight here, one of Kieślowski's cameramen, Slavomir Idshak, and I persuaded him to come and teach. And the week before he was coming, I said, "What equipment do you require?" And he said, "Oh, I don't need any equipment." This was a cameraman who was going to teach the directors and the camera students for a fortnight. And for a fortnight, he got them to think about the drama in the scenes that he put before them, how they should be staged, how they should be broken down into shots, but never with a camera. And it was very clear, and they said afterwards that this was the most stimulating couple of weeks they'd had in their whole time at the school. And it had something to do with the fact they were thinking beyond what they might see through that lens. They were thinking about drama in space. They were thinking about rhythms. They were thinking about emotion, not about the mechanics of the image. And all these things Sandy knew only too well.
When I first joined the Institute, I had made an assumption which turned out to be entirely wrong, which was that the School of Theatre, that taught acting, would want to teach actors who would work in the media. And I had assumed that people who worked in cinema would want to learn about acting. I could not have been more wrong. There was a war between people behind the camera and the people in front of the camera. I thought it would be different in academia. It is a little different in that it's even worse. The distrust of the people who work behind the camera of the people who work in front, and vice versa, is extreme.
Even still on film sets, I'm always startled by how much of the crew around me have an innate hostility or resentment toward the actors, and that it's built on that the actors are perceived to be babies, or why are they different than us? And that essentially what I'm always drawn to is that none of the people working on the film, these people who sometimes express these opinions, have ever seen themselves blown up in a close-up to the size of a building. They've never woken up maybe having had a fight with their loved one and knowing I have to play this very happy scene today and I'm going to be examined like a microscope. And whatever I succeed or fail at doing will then be ripped apart in 50 national magazines. And that we exist behind the lens with this incredible sense of anonymity, and our failures and our successes are borne by their faces. And that sense, it's not merely the act of actually doing it, which to me is huge, and it's a kind of physicalizing, it's a kind of palpable, organic sense of what the actor's struggle is with a line, with a piece of movement, with the script itself. But it's also just that sense of what it's like to be in their shoes. Directing that first film of mine, Heavy, there was a moment where the DP was getting frustrated because Liv Tyler was doing a very emotional scene, and she kept wandering out of this single source of light he had in this very dark tavern for her to land in. And he kept going up to her between takes and trying to say, please, could you try and remember to stand here and not here? And I could see she was getting very frustrated because she was in an emotional state. She was trying to maintain this kind of emotional state between takes. And it suddenly, Sandy snapped in my head, and I asked the DP to step back, and I just took one of the bar stools and moved it to where he didn't want her, and said, that's all we need. It was reminding me of Sandy saying, stand in the actor's shoes, walk in their shoes. If their cross is looking awkward, walk it. Is it ridiculous? You know, inhabit these moves, inhabit them and understand them. And it was just a kind of literal moment. And of course, Liv hit the mark on the next take, and it's the one in the film. And it was just simply understanding that sometimes it's better not, again, to talk about something. It's almost a directorial lesson in nonverbal or pre-verbal cinema, only as direction. How do I help her hit her mark without telling her to?
I've concentrated most of my energies on this particular program, which I like very much indeed, which is to take the make-believe of acting and working with actors and requiring people who will develop behind the camera to be in front of the camera, requiring the directors to learn about working with actors by being actors, by knowing what it is to be inside the skin of an actor. And it seems to me that the capacity to think not from your point of view, but to think through the eyes of the other. In other words, the thought of interaction between people, of transactions, of human transactions, as distinct from self-expression. Self-expression is for the arts, it seems to me, and drama is different from the arts. Drama is not self-expression. Drama is the expression of tensions between people. And there's a certain degree to which you've got to have the capacity to be other than yourself. Just as the actor has to distinguish between himself as an actor and the character in the role, and to make this strange split of the mind in being a character and being outside the character at the same time, that is very, very foreign to, I think, to the self-expressive artist filmmaker.
It's important to know the screen sizes or the camera setups or this or that, or how to work with the crew, but if you do not know how to communicate with the actors and how to bring out that side of it, you're going to have this brilliantly filmed piece which is dead because the actors are not alive in it. And that's another aspect of the teaching which I feel in my period he was moving into, but was not fully realizing why he wanted actors in his class. He wanted, a lot of the film students were kind of film nerds that had no theater experience. They felt shy around actors because the actors were prettier than them a lot of the time and so forth. They did not bond with the actors.
I feel very strongly that a director should be ambidextrous in theatre and in film. I don't really respect the kind of movie director who is too timid to take on the job of directing in theatre, which is perhaps less financially rewarding, and is immensely more difficult because you don't have this instrument here, this weapon that you can use against actors. You are there naked with the actors on the stage. But I think the ability to deal directly with actors, regardless of the technology, is absolutely essential to the movie director. And this, again, it's a pity, but that is something that doesn't appear in a very large number of students who would apply to film schools.
One of the reasons Sandy was really fascinated with getting us and sending me in particular into an acting school was just because I think he felt that it had gotten silly to the degree that film students were becoming these kinds of glorified DPs. We were becoming knowledge of film stock, and we were becoming knowledge of lenses, and those were our basics we were getting. And we were also, in a sense, watching and mimicking movies we admired. So we were, becoming kind of experts in being faux Kubricks, or faux Spielbergs, or faux Ken Russells, or whatever it was at that moment for people. But then, in a sense, the ability to express ourselves with tools we knew how to use was limited, because while we were learning to use the lenses and the microphones, the most primal tool, which is the kind of making of a performance with your body in front of a lens, was just a skill and a world completely unexplored.
We would like to look for a breed of youngster who is unlike the majority of students that go to film schools, who has an instinct and a background of the acting impulse, that is understanding through acting and through performance, who in the end, writing, because they are, like most of the best screenwriters operating, is originally an actor.
Writing is acting. I mean, when I was a junior writer, when I first went to a studio and was collaborating with another writer, I used to see Johnny Dighton sitting at the typewriter and being the Duchess. And you see on this funny little pudgy face, you see the authority. And if you watch any good writer, he plays between his ears, he plays the role. And hearing the lines, hearing the playing of the lines in your mind's ear, and seeing the performance in your mind's eye, is the essence of filmmaking. The other thing, getting it on the screen, is the medium. Film begins between the ears and under the head of one character, and ends between the ears and under the scalp of the audience.
If you set up this video camera and just let it roll while I'm in here alone writing a script, I would probably be shocked at what I do when I'm actually writing, how I physically am and what my face looks like. And I've been tempted to do it, but it's a little, I don't know, it might be a little too freaky, because I really physically get into the moment of where my character is. And there is a kind of a dual process where I step into that character's shoes and then alternately step out and see a kind of God's eye view of the scene and the elements in balance. But then I'm right back into, maybe it's a different character. I'm seeing the scene from their point of view. And it really becomes automatic after a while as a writer. But having the experience of acting, not professionally, but just doing it. And I've since, even out of CalArts, taken acting workshops and just kept at that, because there is a facility that taps into in a writer, which is very good for creating dimensional characters. You're actually stepping into their skin and understanding the world from their point of view.
One of the sad things I find is that some of the most intelligent students that one works with have the kind of critical intelligence which sits back and sees from the outside instead of ever getting inside the skin of characters. That's the anti-dramatic intelligence. That's the intelligence of the critic. The ability of the dramatic writer is very much like the ability of the actor, which incidentally is one of the reasons why I keep trying to recruit people who have some background in performing skills, in storytelling is a performing skill, and so is acting. The kind of imagination that can get inside the skin of a single individual and see from that point of view, and only from that point of view, who can feel from the inside a personality. And it's a tricky thing to do, because you've got to be able to feel from inside one personality and then make a jump to behind the eyes of a different personality, the antagonist and the protagonist and so on. So you've got to have this sort of schizoid ability to switch identifications. Well, that is a kind of histrionic performing imagination that is very different from critical intelligence. And the thing is that I find that many students are expected by their teachers to have a critical and objective imagination, are unable to to do that game playing, so that criticism and intellectualizing has become an inhibition against imagination. Imagination, after all, it means quite strictly the making of images. And in the case of dramatic imagination, it means the capacity to see an image from this point of view and then switch to another point of view. And without that playfulness of leaping points of view, you don't have somebody who has the impulse to become a dramatic writer. I mean, the best screenwriters I've worked with were people who are absolutely brilliant in telling stories, anecdotes here, and in holding you absolutely riveted and not going on too long. Capturing your interest quickly, holding the tension, building to a crisis and a payoff and a punchline, and out. Now that's an ability that is very rare among youngsters in California. They all waffle on and have no point. But the ability just to recognize the structure, which is how to hold the listener, firstly to snag, buttonhole the listener, keep them in a state of anticipation, building up to waiting to see what happens, and then when it is happening, getting the full impact of the meaning and the punch here. That kind of ability is rare as rubies among young people today.
A better way to learn to direct was maybe to learn to act. And once you understand that, whether you're good or not is sort of irrelevant. Once you understand the craft, the task as best you can, then perhaps you're in position to write for those people. And then having written for those people, then perhaps you're in a position to maybe operate a camera for somebody. And then once you've done that, maybe then you're ready to start directing. And all of this was understanding the layers and layers and layers and layers of craft.
When I was an art school student, when I was besotted with the theatre, I had the enormous privilege of learning that I was an absolutely terrible actor. Quite useless, but I have never lost my love of seeing good actors. I don't think directors need to be good actors. I learned early that I was a bad one, but I never lost the love of good acting. It's quite difficult for anybody to appreciate and to work well with actors without the first-hand experience of the often humiliating problems of being an actor. I would have thought it was really essential for the director who was going to work with actors to have attempted acting and to have learned what the problems of the actor from inside, from the actor's point of view and not from the director's point of view. Because you will learn things there. You will learn what you must never, never again do to an actor if you are at the mercy of a bad director. And I think the directors who are insensitive to the performer are really bad directors. There is, incidentally, about this, of course, there are many directors who so often appear insensitive who are marvelous in handling actors. I don't need you necessarily need to be kind or gentle with actors. I think you need really to feel intensely the problem from the actor's point of view. Then I think the actor will respect the director. The capacity to tell a story. In other words, to capture the interest of a listener, or in the case of film, a viewer, hold the interest in terms of expectation of what is going to happen next, and with a rising tension up to some point, some unexpected, to some degree unexpected, and at the same degree also inevitable resolution to the story, a crisis which resolves and rewards and finishes and ends the tension.
It's interesting to me knowing people who want to direct who don't have story sense. Immediately, I mistrust them as a director, because if you don't know all of those things, like whose point of view it is and how you want to shoot, if you only master the camera and the technical aspects of the camera, you're not going to, I don't think you're going to be a great director, because it's really about the emotion and the story. It's less about where you put the camera and how the thing is lit, although that's important, but it is more the medium of film is emotions.
Sandy was much more concerned about who the student was, what their energy was like, what it was that drove them to want to become filmmakers, and what their vision of film might be. He was much more interested in that than in their particular technical proficiency at a given point in their lives.
We're starting next year an experiment in trying to recruit a number of students into a rather specialized program, which will be 50% in the School of Film and Video and 50% in the School of Theatre. And one of the things that, for example, we're asking students to supply is just to take a videotape of themselves, like this might be, and tell a story in 3 minutes. It is singularly the thing that a tremendous number of students passionately interested in working in film don't understand and don't have that gift. They cannot condense and they cannot recognize the need to keep the audience on the hook of attention and to be economical in arriving at a conclusion as fast as possible.
I remember one class where Sandy was saying, well, let me do this myself and you'll see what I'm getting at. And he told an extraordinarily moving story about a litter of kittens that had been born in his apartment in London, I think even before the war or just after the war, and a decision that he made that he couldn't take care of them or provide for them, and that he gave them to a boy who put them in a sack and rode the bicycle off with the cats jumping around in the sack. I mean, I almost get shivers. Remembering that image was so potent. I don't remember what the assignment was that he was trying to make the point with the story, what the line was, but that was an example of first-rate raconteurism. And if anything in that class worked, it was that the students sitting there must have gotten that little shivery feeling of what it's like to be around the fireplace with the old-timer who can share you something outside of your lifetime in an experience he had that has haunted him all these years, and it becomes part of your life, and you pass it along to somebody else, either literally in that story or in another story of your own.
When we designed the audition piece for our program, we decided two things were imperative. We didn't care to see a film that they had made. What he wanted to do is have them tell a story and do a monologue from an existing piece. The reason being that, first of all, you want to see if they could recognize a story. Do they have a sense of events that have a beginning, a middle, and an end? And importantly, in their doing the dramatic monologue, in Sandy's words, could they inhabit the skin of another person? And this was important for the writer, because the writer has to play every character. It's important for the editor, because if an editor can act, has acting experience, then there is a visceral response. It's not simply an intellectual activity. And of course, the director has to play every character.
It's no accident that one of the things that we ask our students to do is to send us a videotape of themselves telling a story. And we expect the student to understand that somebody who's telling a story has to keep us interested. And we have to see nuances of belief and behavior here, and have it, in other words, has to have the impulses. They don't have to be good actors. In fact, a lot of the best directors are probably bad actors. But bad actors as they are, they have the imaginative compulsions of the actor. And that's why they understand other actors who are better than they are and can follow the lead that the actor gives the director. Actors teach more to directors than directors ever teach to actors. I think that the only way in which a movie director can work with actors is to have some experience of acting. Mm-hmm. And I mean of acting in theatre. I think it's only in the theatre that one can see and one can participate in the slow and gradual evolution of a performance. The slow process by which the actor gropes from first reading to early rehearsals to developing to getting up on your feet and staging and whatnot. Yeah, that's how you learn about acting from the inside. Film there never is time. I've studied in the theatre and watched how actors gradually develop acting roles. This is an experience which is foreign, I think, to a very large number of people who direct actors in movies. And because it's foreign to them, I think a large majority of movie directors are incompetent in working with actors. Now, to get this experience, the only way I managed to do it in the early days was by coming to a deal with the theatre school in which certain select students, whom we threw out of the film school, into the theatre school for a year, and told them to go serve a year of apprenticeship as performers in the theatre school.
Filmmaking is acting in your head. the sad thing in a way is that many youngsters come in using the camera as a kind of pair of blinkers with which to shut out reality. And some of the success we're having just now is in working with students from our theatre school, requiring the filmmaker who hides behind the camera this side to go out in front, and we're also requiring the actor to come the other side.
The start of it for me was him just saying, I'm not going to speak to you next year. I mean, I still remember being in his office and him saying to me, it was after a year of me being his teaching assistant, he said, you've drained me. There's nothing left I can give you. I have nothing left to offer. You've taken all my classes twice. You've been my teaching assistant. I've talked about your movies, and so I think you should go to the acting school next year. And I don't know whether he thought, and maybe this is why I asked, that he would meet with some resistance from me, because it seemed absolutely thrilling to me. I had never been, I mean, I think I was a good base piece of material for him, because I was not the technocrat with movies in which I was someone frightened of public speaking or who never wanted to get, the idea of being with these actors and being in a studio of actors doing plays all year, to me seemed positively, exhilarating.
Sandy was in awe of the actor, and I think you have to be if you're going to be a director. I remember that Sandy used to say the director works with a lot of inanimate objects: the camera, the sound, the boom, the dolly, the lights. The one animate object is the human being, and that's the actor. And if you confuse that human being, or frighten them, or threaten them, and you cannot, and you don't get what you want from them, and they don't do a good job, it's your fault. He feels it's the director's responsibility to get the performance. It's not the actor's responsibility. That if an actor is having trouble with his lines, or that, you have to wonder, what are you doing as a director that is creating that situation?
He used to tell a story about Peter Sellers, that he would come to him with an idea and he'd say, I've got a really funny idea, let me show you. And he would show it to him, and everybody would fall out laughing. It was hysterically funny. And then they'd set up the cameras and they would shoot it, and it wasn't funny. What he was talking about is paying attention to how each actor works. So Peter Sellers, he realized, whenever he would come up with an idea that was funny, he would say, hold, stop, don't tell me. He would set up the cameras and he'd say, just do it. And then he would capture that. He wasn't telling that as that's how you should do it when you're doing comedy. He saw that as something very specific to this performer, and that he had to adapt to the way this performer works. So I think often what he was very pragmatic in saying, what's best for each actor? They're different. You can't work with them in all the same way. You have to figure out who they are and what's going to work.
He impressed on us how important it was to be sensitive to the actors. And saying something like Mandy, the little girl obviously wanted a lot of his attention, and his attention was on her. But he said some of the other actors really wanted his attention too. And they focus on quite peripheral things, like one of them always had to have his approval of what hat she was wearing. And he said, you have to give this approval, you have to give this kind of attention, even if it seems to you to be kind of potty. And he said when he was making the Ladykillers, he had this ensemble, obviously, of the villains. And he suddenly realised that they all wanted to ask his advice. And just as he was about to say action, they'd just say, hang on a minute, Sandy, about my character. And he realised everybody was doing that in turn. And they were kind of playing a game where they were the last person to speak to him won. But he had to keep taking notice of them, otherwise they wouldn't relax. And he said the other thing about actors, when you're giving direction to them, they will ask you a question, and it doesn't matter what you answer, as long as you answer very, very firmly. And the actress playing Susan in Sweet Smell of Success, he said before she was going to do an incredibly tricky scene, she said to him, is my character a virgin? And he said, I cannot remember if I said, yes, she is, or no, she isn't, as long as I gave the answer firmly. He said, because it didn't affect how she played the scene, but she played it with confidence.
Don't ever touch the actor, is what Sandy once said, very emphatically, when a director was trying to show me, as the actor, how to sit at a table. And he actually stepped behind me, the director, the directing student, grabbed me by the shoulders and moved me a little bit over to where he wanted me to be. In Sandy's class was Sandy watching, and Sandy stopped the whole class and yelled at the directing student, "Don't ever touch the actor." Point was, communicate with the actor what you want him to do or be, and have the actor discover how to do that. Sometimes you realize when an actor shows you something that that's a far better thing or idea than the director could think of in his own head, sitting in his own room, blocking his scene. That sometimes the creative part of an actor will show the director how the scene really, how the actor needs to move or be. But if you grab an actor and move him, you cut all that creativity off, and the actor just becomes this puppet who can't function, really. And he made a big point about that.
He said that actors he believed, were basically emotionally needy, that they had very strong need to be reinforced in what they were doing. And he would say the director was like a big sun, and he would shed light on the actors, and they would feel warm and good and happy because the director was warming them up. But what he would do is, he said, if you wanted an actor to do something, it wasn't always by telling them consciously what it was. You would move the spotlight to where you would want them to go, and they would start to go, I'm not doing the right thing, and they would start to, and he would imitate this. He would say they would shake like they were cold because they're outside the sunlight, right? And they're a little cold, and they would begin moving around until they found that light and began to feel warm again and happy because they were pleasing the director. And that seemed to be a nonverbal method for him.
The one or two kids that I saw Sandy work with in workshops, he was exceptionally gentle with. And nevertheless, he would seem both fragile and tough. You know, that was a matter of his making that light stammer work for him. Because basically two things. It would let you know that he knew what he thought. I know what I think, but I want to, what do you think? And the stammer would actually provoke the students to want to help. And that energy of wanting to help would actually also have a catalytic effect in terms of getting them to think through the problem and provide the answer that actually Sandy had already wanted, and which he would reward. Yes, yes. Again, with the stammer, feeling, oh, good, I'm pleasing Sandy, I'm helping Sandy. I'm helping him get what he wants, but it's what I want too.
I was asked early on at CalArts by a student who said, how do you get an actor to do what you want? And the question threw me for a moment, and I didn't answer. I sort of stammered and couldn't think of what to say. And so the student persisted, and I suddenly found myself flashing out, it's like to give you a bit of irritation. And I said, you don't. You get an actor to want to do what you need. What the director must do is really provide the actor with the encouragement to be what the director needs him to be. And there's a very simple way of doing this. It's simple, almost too simple. What you do as a director is that you fall in love with the actor in the role. Note that I say in the role. Now, as you've got to get yourself infatuated, and to a degree, it always borders on the sexual, whether it's male or female, in which you find yourself absolutely besottedly adoring of the actor while he is inside the role as you feel it. And when an actor does something, when an actor feels you feeling that here, it reminds me of a scene, if you remember, in De Sica's Miracolo Milano, where there's a great sunbeam that comes down on a derelict wasteland, and one of the characters wanders into it and feels warm. And it's marvelous because the warm is nourishing and so superb. And then the sunlight shifts over here and the actor feels cold and moves over into the sunlight. What the director must do is feel this genuine adoration and love for the actor in the role. But if the actor moves outside it, what you do consciously or unconsciously is you dim the brilliance of your love, and the actor feels cold and maneuvers back into your love. It's emotional blackmail in a very good cause. Before you can control an actor, the thing that you have to control is yourself and your own feelings. You have to take a character whom, in fact, you may find a pain in the neck otherwise, and an absolute bore, who may be your enemy, and you've got to fall in love with her or him in that given role. You've got to suppress entirely your feelings.
I do recall him observing a student director working on something and throwing a temper tantrum at one of the actors. And I remember him speaking to other students later on, I don't think to the one that engaged in that, but bringing up this episode of this director losing his temper with the actors. And Sandy was pointing out that this was utterly unacceptable, that it was totally incorrect. And he followed it up by saying, in the entirety of his career, that he felt he had never once lost his temper with the actors unless he intended to. And the distinction was, said, yes, I did lose my temper, but I did it as a trick. I needed something from them. I wanted to frighten them. I wanted to make them think I was angry.
I was a theater student at CalArts. I did notice that he used to treat the actors a lot nicer than he did his directing students. I don't know if it's because we were guests or because he just expected more of the directors in a different way. It certainly wasn't a question of whether or not he thought we were bright, but that we had a different role to play in the class.
You trust him whether he trusts you or not. In other words, you adore him whether he hates your guts or not. You keep on adoring him or her. And what happens, oddly enough, is that people are terribly susceptible to, mind you, actors will often and should test the genuineness of your feelings. And if you are found out in that here, they are quite right to distrust you, and you have lost them, and you have lost your movie. One of the most common errors that the inexperienced director falls into, and I speak of myself when I started, is that having studied the script very intensely, I thought I heard how the lines would be played, so that when an actor came along and played them not quite like that, they sounded, quote, wrong, unquote. And so I said, oh, no, let's do it again, hoping that it would change. And this is the failure on my part to listen carefully to the actor during the rehearsals, so that you don't impose your preconceived idea of what the performance is on the actor. And listening is what a director does most. Listen carefully and watch. Watch the body language. While somebody is performing, you watch the way their hands are moving. You know, you're scratching your knee over there. Look at the way he holds his pencil like that here. That's what you do. You absorb the behavior, and you absorb it until you see exactly what is going on inside the actor. When you've done that, you can usually avoid trying to impose your own preconception on the performer. And that will save you a lot of takes. Because then you will realize what is necessary and what is not. I would not dictate to a performer, because whenever it's fatal, in fact, to give in my opinion, to give an actor a reading of a line, because when you do, the actor will then give a very good impersonation of you, which is no use to you at all. If you have to show an actor how to perform an action, or if you have to let an actor hear the phrasing that you want, you have lost your chief and most important asset, which is the actor's own personality, because the actor then is giving a poor imitation of you. And if you're a great actor, the poor imitation of you is never as good as you, the actor, will be, you know. And if you're a bad actor, it's even worse. So you never give the actor the reading, and you never show him the timing or the gesture. What you do is that you try to give the actor what he or she, the actor, needs to arrive at the actor's impulse and to keep it afresh. The story of Willie Wyler and Larry Olivier is a useful one for to remember it. Wyler was rather famous for taking many takes and just saying, let's have another one. And apparently Olivier at one point stopped him on take 25 and said, Willie, what do you want? And Wyler said, better. But funny story, but as an actor, I would have struck Wyler at that particular point, and certainly I would have known that I was working with an incompetent director. Because unless the director at each time can give further encouragement and impetus to try a variety, then I don't think the director is doing his job. The director must be always not telling the actor what to do, but giving the actor what he or she needs in order to achieve what the director thinks is necessary. on our first cold reading, we don't generally expect the actors to give a performance. Here you are. It's better in a way to read quite flatly, to read mechanically. The idea is that if you start to put, I'm sorry, it's my fluffy, let me go again.
Slate last time. Now we're on slate.
Now you're rolling.
Okay, let me handle it from here a bit.
Okay, sometimes we roll.
Okay, we're rolling.
She said she'll take over it, and I'm not saying. Stand by. Action.
So we've got this as for a demonstration on staging. So, on first cold reading, we don't really want the actors to give too much expression to the scene. Indeed, it may be a mistake too, because it's better in rehearsal or at the early stages in reading to read quite flat and mechanically. That way that you don't jump too early to conclusions, to the rather obvious readings and intonations. So, on first cold reading, we don't want you to give too much color to the reading. Better to read it just quite flat, mechanically. The idea is that if you repress the emotions in the early stages here, it'll make it possible for you to find fresher and more original meanings in the scene as we rehearse. It's better to read the thing quite mechanically so that you don't jump too soon to the very obvious interpretations, the intonations and readings that you get stuck with. If you repress these and discover them during rehearsal, you often find that they're very much fresher. So from the beginning, quite flatly, go ahead.
Come on, tell me.
You didn't tell your boyfriend about me?
No, I told him I was going to Houston for my birthday. Tell me.
'Cause I don't need that shit.
Bruce, tell me.
Not till your birthday.
Bruce, I'm going to kill you. Tell me.
Okay, but you're spoiling it.
I don't care.
All right, you ready? We are going to the concert.
Are you serious? Are you serious? When did you buy the tickets? It's been sold out for a week.
I know. This guy in the dorms didn't want his tickets anymore, so he's selling them dirt cheap front row.
Oh God, Bruce, I don't believe this. This is great. This is...
And she spots something. What you see is you see Jamie at the foot of the steps, and then you looking at her, you see what she's looking at, you turn and you see him also.
Cette scène-là, c'est une scène qui exprime le fait que Émilie a compris. Elle a compris qu'on a tué son chien et que c'est sa mère. Et elle va le dire. Elle va le dire ce qu'elle pense. Vous voyez que c'est une scène très importante. Maintenant, nous allons commencer à la lire. Mais nous allons la lire absolument en nous interdisant toute expression. Je vous ai dit pourquoi peut-être déjà. Non, je vais vous le dire. Si, à la première lecture d'un texte, un acteur cherche à donner une expression, il y a toutes les chances pour que cette expression soit un cliché, soit une routine, soit quelque chose qu'elle a vu sur l'écran ou qu'elle a déjà fait, que ce soit quelque chose déjà utilisé. Ce qu'il faut que nous trouvions maintenant, chère Émilie, chère Gisèle, ce qu'il faut que nous trouvions, c'est le mystérieux mariage entre vous et l'Émilie qui est dans ces lignes. Et ce mariage, nous ne l'aurons que si vous arrivez sans idée préconçue. Si vous arrivez avec une Émilie déjà existante, nous ne trouverons pas la vraie Émilie. Notre boulot maintenant, c'est de trouver la vraie Émilie. C'est ça le travail d'un film. Si dans un film, on trouve chaque rôle, l'acteur et le metteur en scène ensemble, ou l'acteur tout seul trouve le rôle, eh bien, on a un grand film. On a un grand film parce que les personnages sont des personnages qui ne correspondent à aucun autre personnage connu, ce sont des personnages originaux, ce sont vraiment des créations. Alors, je vais vous dire comment je connais cette méthode. Cette méthode, je la dois à Michel Simon. Lorsque je travaillais avec Michel Simon, il me parlait tout le temps de la méthode à l'italienne. Et cette méthode à l'italienne, d'ailleurs, j'ai remarqué que Jouvet répétait comme ça. Puis alors j'ai pris des renseignements, j'ai appris que des gens, tout très honorables, comme M. Shakespeare ou M. Molière, avaient travaillé comme ça. Ça consiste à lire un texte exactement comme si on lisait l'annuaire téléphonique. On s'interdit absolument toute expression. On lit, les mots. Et puis alors ça pénètre tout doucement l'esprit s'ouvre, le cœur s'ouvre, les sens s'ouvrent, et à un certain moment, si l'acteur ou l'actrice a des qualités, vous avez comme une petite étincelle. Pan, ça part, et vous avez le personnage. Ben voilà, nous allons chercher ce personnage maintenant ensemble. Alors voilà, nous commençons à lire, et nous commençons à lire sans aucune expression.
Maman, vous voulez que je vous embrasse. Avant, il faut que je vous dise quelque chose.
C'est peut-être encore même trop d'expression. Je voudrais une voix absolument neutre, comme un gosse qui lirait l'annuaire téléphonique. Voyez-vous, vous voulez que je vous embrasse, avant, il faut que je vous dise quelque chose. À ce point-là.
Vous voulez que je vous embrasse, avant, il faut que je vous dise quelque chose. Je sais ce que vous avez fait à Don, il est mort. Je sais pourquoi il est mort, je sais comment il est mort. Bien sûr, pour les gens, vous avez eu raison de faire piquer Don. Il était peut-être enragé. Il aurait pu mordre un enfant. Me mordre.
Voilà, voyez-vous, je vous arrête. Trop d'expressions sur « il aurait pu mordre un enfant ». Lorsque vous pensez à l'enfant mordu, vous avez immédiatement des images qui affluent vers votre cerveau et vous imaginez la tragique portion d'un enfant. Faut pas, parce que c'est peut-être pas ça que vous imaginerez quand vous aurez trouvé votre personnage. Peut-être quand vous aurez trouvé votre personnage, vous découvrirez que Émilie a tellement de ressentiments qu'elle ne s'apitoie pas du tout sur l'enfant mordu, mais seulement sur Don.
Oui.
N'est-ce pas? En réalité, peut-être même que Émilie, nous allons peut-être trouver une façon absolument inattendue de marquer la douleur d'Émilie. Peut-être qu'Émilie rit quand elle a une grande douleur. Peut-être qu'elle est insultante, peut-être qu'elle crache, ou peut-être qu'elle est absolument immobile et qu'elle ne fait rien. On ne sait pas encore. Alors, ne nous fermons pas l'avenir en décidant ce que fera Émilie. Nous ne le savons pas. Nous lisons les lignes simplement pour pénétrer Émilie, pour connaître Émilie. Une autre parenthèse. Lorsque j'ai fait Boudu avec Michel Simon, eh bien, il n'y a pas que les lignes qui aident à trouver un personnage. Il y a aussi la démarche. Le jour où Michel Simon m'a parlé avec la voix de Boudu, il marchait aussi avec la démarche de Boudu. Ben vous, quand vous allez me parler avec la voix d'Émilie, vous marcherez comme marche Émilie. Alors allons-y. Je sais comment il est mort.